And I got a bigger dick.
Reboots seem to have become increasingly common in recent years. It seems people feel that if something isn't doing as well as it used to, rebooting it is the answer. Capcom decided to reboot their highly successful Devil May Cry series after Devil May Cry 4 didn't sell as many copies as they'd hoped, and handed over the creative direction to a Western company in Ninja Theory. The guys responsible for Heavenly Sword, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and later for Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Heavenly Sword was a launch title for the PS3 and was pretty good, with a pretty epic fantasy story. The gameplay was also pretty good except for the motion control parts, but I'm not a massive fan of them in general, to be fair. Enslaved was also pretty good. The platforming was a bit linear and there wasn't a massive sense of challenge when doing it, as you couldn't fall and die. But it was still fun. While I haven't played it, I have it on good authority that Hellblade is also a very good game. It's more story-centric than gameplay-centric, but the gameplay is serviceable. I do need to play the game though. To say DmC wasn't received well is kind of an understatement. People hated the redesigns of the characters, the artistic direction, the environments, and the dialogue.
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
And I got a bigger dick.
That being said, reception to it has softened over time, and people have warmed to it somewhat. Some people can even appreciate it being a good game in its own right, even if it is a bad Devil May Cry game. I liked it. In fact, it's one of 2 Devil May Cry games I've actually platinumed. The other being Devil May Cry 2, which is interesting as these are the ones people generally don't like. So, being one of the few people that really liked the reboot Devil May Cry game, along with my sister and Ninja Theory co-founder Tamim Antonidas, I kinda wish there had been a sequel. It's unlikely we'll see this, as Ninja Theory have been bought by Microsoft and Capcom have taken the series back to its roots. But hey, I've got an overactive imagination and nothing else to do with it, so let's pitch ideas for a hypothetical DmC Devil May Cry sequel. One thing I felt DmC did better than the other Devil May Cry games was it had much better platforming. There's platforming in the other games, but it's basic and more of a means to an end than an integral part. In DmC I love jumping around and using the grappling hooks to pull things towards me, pull myself towards stuff, doing stuff in mid-air as well as the various dashes. I feel focusing on the platforming would allow the game to stand out, similar to the Prince of Persia games. They've got good combat, or at least Warrior Within and Two Thrones do, but the focus is on the platforming. Keep the combat from the previous game. It worked well, simple to understand and learn. Learning more elaborate combos was straightforward to do, and if you want to smash the attack buttons, that works as well. I feel I should come up with some new weapons that could be used, seeing as that's a series staple, and the only game to not have different types of weapons, Devil May Cry 2, had some of the most boring combat I've played. So besides possibly bringing back Aerix, Osiris, Arbiter and Aquila, maybe bringing a spear, Kasarigama, double swords, maybe a whip. I was watching G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra recently and I like Storm Shadow's double katana. I could definitely see Virgil using something like that. Very Darth Maul-esque, and as we all know, Darth Maul is cool as hell. I was recently reminded of the Legacy of Kain games and how Raziel could go between the spectral and material realms, and felt this could work in DmC since in the first game Dante was pulled into limbo at certain points. Why not give him the ability to go between limbo and the real world, since at the end of the first game the 2 realms had fused. Going back and forth between limbo and the real world in real time would be cool, and this mechanic could be used to do some interesting puzzles, platforming and maybe even some combat. I should mention that you'd be able to play as Virgil for some of the story missions. I love the Virgil's Downfall DLC. It's still the only time we've been able to play as Virgil in an original story and not just rehashing the same missions as Dante. Yeah, it reused assets from the main game and used stylized cutscenes instead of making ones with in-game models, but it was still fun. I think you could control Kat for some stealth/recon stuff as well. Possibly. Like maybe she spray paints certain areas for Dante to use, which would make it easier for him at certain intervals, depending on where it's done. So the Devil Trigger is a weird one. In the original version, aka the PS3 and the 360 version, the Devil Trigger made enemies fly in the air and float, allowing you to attack them more easily. While in the PS4 and the X-Bone version, if you use a hardcore mode, it acts like the original Devil Trigger, giving you a power boost and restoring health. In the DLC, Virgil got a doppelganger which mimicked his attacks. This happened in both regular and hardcore mode. Appearance-wise, it wasn't much. There was a filter on screen and you get red eyes and lines going around you and your hair would turn white, which was negated if you used any of the other outfits. You'd have a red hue around you as well, which came across as very Super Saiyan, which I actually didn't have a problem with. If you're going to borrow, borrow from the best. Virgil didn't even get a devil trigger, just a doppelganger running about. Which, to be fair, wasn't bad. Honestly, for the second game though, I'd have it where you had the option to have the damage buff, health regeneration, and the Quicksilver-esque ability of throwing enemies in the air would be an alternate ability, similar to the style modes of the previous games, and you could switch between the two. Likewise, with Virgil, he gets the option to have the standard devil trigger mode, with power buff and health regeneration, and there's the option to change to doppelganger mode as well. Appearance-wise, Dante would be similar to how he was before, except he'd have black eyes, his hair standing on end, and a red hue. I'd have Virgil's be how he looks at the end of Virgil's Downfall, hair up in the air, white eyes, and have a blue hue. Yes, I'm ripping off Super Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z somewhat, but at least it's not as blatant as Sonic the Hedgehog. Since there's a power vacuum in the demon world since Dante and Virgil killed Mundus and there was no heir apparent, all the other demon lords are staking their claim to be the new demon king. This would include Virgil, see the ending to Virgil's Downfall, but they reject him because he's partially responsible for why they're in this mess to begin with. So Arius, yes, a variation of the main bad guy from Devil May Cry 2, is chosen to be the new demon lord, and vows to put demons back in charge. He'll do this by using the Arcana, ancient objects which allow for different powers to be utilised, again similar to Devil May Cry 2. The more he has, the more powerful the demons become. Virgil doesn't like this idea and decides to do his own thing to try and take over, with him reluctantly allying with Dante to stop Arius. He'd have a bit of a Loki vibe going on in this. Dante is doing his best to be the world's protector, but it's hard as some humans feel the world was better under demon rule as it was orderly, some being proper anarchic because societal collapse always brings out these types of people, and the other group just trying to get by.
Message!
He gets told about Arius by an informant or an early boss, and realises he and Kat need to team up with Virgil again to defeat him. There will be some new characters and some twists, but again this is a pitch idea so I haven't thought through everything, okay? So, with any character action, spectacle fighter, hack and slash, whatever you want to call them, one of the main things people like are the bosses. DmC didn't have as many boss fights as previous games, it only had 6, 7 if you include the one from Virgil's Downfall, but I felt they were all enjoyable. So here's some ideas for some. Basically the Virgil fight. It would definitely be in there. These are some of my favourite types of boss fights because of the similarity of gameplay to the player character, where you have to destroy parts of the boss before attacking the core. I like the saviour fight from Devil May Cry 4 and some of the ones in Bayonetta. Doing that with Dante and or Virgil would be cool. This would probably be one of the end boss fights. This one would involve jumping around platforms / chasing the boss, less mashing the attack buttons and more jumping around to find the right time to attack. It would be a nice change of pace. The Succubus fight from the first game had this. This would tie in with the emphasis on platforming I think the game should go for. You know the one, you attack a particular body part or area of the map that allows the weak spot on the boss to be shown, so you can attack to lower its health. This would also have platforming elements as well. I know some people can find these types of boss fights tedious, but I think if they're implemented correctly they could work. Redoing the exact same boss fight is tedious. Doing it in Devil May Cry 3 and 4 as well as Bayonetta was annoying, but I weirdly didn't mind it in Devil May Cry 2 when you were fighting Argosax to Chaos, because that was an amalgamation of the previous bosses. I'd probably change it more that the boss just uses attacks from previous bosses. This would be another one of the final bosses for the game. Honestly, standard enemies in these games are mechanically very similar minus their appearance, so there's not much point in trying to stray from that. I like most of the enemy designs from the previous game, maybe give them some redesigns like biomechanical maybe, or even use some of the unused designs from the concept art. It would be cool to have Dante fight the wisps from Virgil's Downfall, maybe have more variations on the Dream Runner enemies with different coloured masks and abilities. They were some of my favourite enemies to fight. Maybe have some enemies that you have to go between Limbo and the real world to fight. Like you fight them in Limbo, but they go to the real world and can recover. So you have to switch to the real world to finish them off. But then the other enemies in Limbo can still attack you, but you can't attack them because you're in the real world. So you have to prioritise which enemies to go for. So one of the things people didn't like about DmC was Dante's appearance. The black hair is the major one, but I remember people complaining about the coat as well. I can't remember if there were articles on that or if it was just people's comments. Anyway, personally I didn't have a problem with it really. Maybe with the hair, but that was mainly because they gave him white hair at the end so it seemed pointless to change it. But anyway, to differentiate it I feel they should have used a Neo Dante outfit, and this is the one I'd use in DmC too. It has a very punk rock look going on and it has the red associated with Dante. Virgil would mostly be unchanged. I'd have his hair down like it shows when you first start Virgil's Downfall though. This would contrast with when he's in Devil Trigger and his hair's up in the air, proper Super Saiyan like. Maybe have the colours reversed on his coat, but apart from that keep it the same. This means their appearances would contrast greatly. Punk rock looking Dante versus dapper looking Virgil. Maybe tweak Cat's appearance a bit, maybe more in line with some of the concept art designs, but again, that would be it. I loved the music in DmC. It actually made me a fan of Combi Christ. I'm not really a fan of dance music, but when it's paired with an industrial / metal influence, I'm all in on that stuff. Apparently it's called Agrotech and I love it. That would definitely be the soundtrack for the game, carrying on from the original. Whether you get Combi Christ back or another industrial band / artist doesn't really matter massively, so long as the tunes are suitably heavy / bouncy that you want to hack demons to death to it. Honestly, I could see Wes Borland from Limp Bizkit doing something like that. His solo work and work with his bands Blacklight Burns and Eat the Day would definitely fit that vibe. Heck, I've been listening to Darker US lately, their stuff would work as well, I think. So that's my pitch for a hypothetical DmC 2 game. I feel the emphasis on the platforming as well as the different designs and appearances of the characters would help differentiate it more from the mainline series, and further having its own identity. The first game had this, and this hypothetical game would jump off from that point. And while there will be people still complaining it's not a Devil May Cry game, treating it as an alternate universe, like what comic books do, would make it easier to digest, and the fanboys can use that as justification for whether they like it or not. Like Age of Apocalypse and Days of Future Past in the X-Men comics. Having said that, it would be interesting seeing a crossover between original Dante and new Dante. And that could be something. Let me know what you think, if there's stuff you'd add, take out, tweak, etc.